Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Her Resources podcast. I am so excited to be here with my amazing co-host, Cyndi Manuel.
Hello.
How are you? Are you staying warm? Because it's, winter has arrived, right? So
were we not in like the 70s just 2 weeks ago? And now all of a sudden we're getting, it's crazy out there.
Yes, it really is. No, it definitely is. That's why, at least for our amazing guest who is with us today, Neena, who actually lives in Fort Worth, she's probably not experiencing this terrible weather we are. So
love it here. It's beautiful right now.
Yep.
We're very jealous. Colorado can be very extreme. People don't understand that, but it can be. So, no, I think it's pretty if you don't have to drive in it too.
That's my feeling too. I'm okay with the snow if I don't have to be in it. So it's all good. So no, definitely. We are excited to have Neena on our podcast where we're going to be talking Part 2 of Imposter Syndrome. It's a continuation from our episode with the incredible Fatima Nash. We're bringing Neena on to talk. And let me tell you a little bit about who Neena is. She's a transformative human capital management thought leader, revolutionizing organizations with her expertise. Rising from a computer science background, Neena blends technical mastery with HR acumen to prioritize data-driven decisions and transparency. She has modernized the HCM sector with her ROI-driven approach and outstanding tech utilization, making HR a competitive advantage rather than a support function. An engaging speaker, and I know this personally, Neena's presentations are rich, relatable, and humorous, igniting audiences to embrace innovation and foster inclusion. As a stalwart diversity, equity, and inclusion advocate, she champions diverse views and open contributions, sparking cultural change and promoting employee engagement. Her analytical and behavioral skills have proven instrumental in organizational transformation, solidifying her status through publications in renowned platforms like IPMA HR, which is now PSHRA, Route 50, World at Work, and SHRM. With 15 plus years in the consulting realm, Neena's data-driven solutions have driven value amidst fast-paced tech advancements. Her vibrant energy, sharp wit, and exceptional ability to connect with people have made her a favored speaker and consultant. Put simply, Neena is the people's champion, driving organizational success with her unwavering focus on empowerment and strategic insight. So you're probably all scratching your head going, why on earth do we have this incredible person on here talking about imposter syndrome?
Seriously, I'm like, you should be the furthest from imposter syndrome.
Right?
Fortunately, we all go through this. So
yes, no, it is so true. Well, and just a reminder to everybody out there, what imposter syndrome is that it refers to a psychological pattern in which individuals doubt their accomplishments, feel undeserving of their success, and fear being exposed as a fraud. Despite external evidence of competence, those experiencing imposter syndrome often believe they don't deserve their achievements or that they've only succeeded due to luck rather than skill or expertise. So it's just incredible to me because we have had the pleasure of meeting with such incredible women, Cyndi. So whenever I think about these women experiencing imposter syndrome, it just seems crazy, right? That anybody would feel that way, but it is so common in the work world today.
I feel like I'm in we're, I guess, in really good company.
I think
because
so.
I mean, just knowing Neena, your story, which I can't wait for you to share with people, but if you're feeling it sometimes too, then it gives me a level of comfort. Honestly, I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
It's all right to feel
Yep.
imposter syndrome
That's
from time
right.
to time.
Feels a
Yeah.
little normal. Neena, why don't
I,
you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and about your background? Because you have such a fascinating background and really kind of how you got to where you are today. So, why don't you share with our listeners about that?
Yes. So I'm an immigrant from India, and I actually, started my journey because I don't know how many of you know this, but a lot of times in India, women are not given opportunities, right? And I come from a family where my father served in the Air Force and had very open ideas and forward thinking, I would say, in India. But a lot of my relatives didn't have that. And he put me, in an engineering college because, of course, one thing I will say that as being an Indian, we never can get away from being an engineer or a doctor. Those are the only two things in the past, and hopefully it ends with me here. And, we can think of other things in the coming generations. But that's the thinking we grew up in. And, either you became an engineer or a doctor. And so luckily, my father, even though many people told him, like, just get her married and, let her be a regular housewife, my father said, no, I want my daughter to have education. And once he finished that, my dad used to work after he retired basically from Air Force. He worked for an oil company. And he noticed that a lot of people in the oil company who were engineers were going abroad. And he comes home one day and says, well, everyone's going. Why can't my daughter go? And, it takes money, it takes effort. And we didn't know anything. We didn't know ABCs of going abroad. And, we didn't have internet. And, in those days, it was just coming, like email was popular and starting to get popular.
Mhm.
So, research was harder. And because no one had gone from our families. And my father said, I'm going to find out from the people in my organization. They were all men. And when he told me finally, I said, I was excited. I actually applied for TOEFL. I did my TOEFL exam. I did my GRE. And it's actually a very interesting story, but I don't want to go too deep into that. But anyway, I wrote those and I came back and my dad said, okay, we are going to apply. So we picked these places and we apply. And, I got I got admission and it was crazy. And I picked Ohio University to go to. And I was going to do my master's in computer science. And I still remember we didn't really share it with all our relatives because we didn't know how they were going to react, right? And so that summer, my elder brother was going to get married before I was going to leave for US. And we go to this a wedding, my brother's wedding, and everybody comes to know that we're thinking of sending me abroad. And it's crazy because, everyone's sitting there, all my relatives, and they're telling my dad, this is the biggest mistake of your life because,
Oh, wow.
you need to spend that money that you're going to spend educating her in a dowry. And, you can get such a good
Wow.
match. And I remember one of my uncles, and they were discussing in front of me as if I don't even exist. Okay.
Wow.
like
So
you
they
weren't
sit
there.
there and they talk and they say, one of them says, this is such a big mistake.
Wow.
I actually know of a person. All she has to do is stand when he tells her to stand, and sit when she has to sit.
Oh my
But it's an
goodness.
exceptional family with a lot of wealth. And I'm listening to this. They're talking like I don't exist. And these are my
Wow.
uncles,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
just tells you the
Gosh.
thought process in those days. And
Right.
so I was the first person who was unmarried who came, which is also a very big deal because the general thought was if you are an unmarried female, you will never get married in your entire life because, there are,
Mm.
what is she doing there, right? What
Right.
kind of moral character does she have? So, these are very backward thinking that we have in India and, in those days especially. But my father said, I don't care. I'm very open. If she falls
Good
in
for
love with
him.
someone, that's fine. And I'm going to
Yeah.
send her. And so that's how I actually came to US. So I'm very happy that I had a dad who was, who had
Yes.
the thinking and made me independent today. But I came here, did my master's, and, I started consulting. And that's how I got into this field, basically. But talking about imposter syndrome, I didn't have it for a very long time, right?
Okay.
Because I was I was very fortunate to work in companies where people actually valued me.
Mhm.
In those days there weren't that many Indians actually, and
Yeah.
but still in the companies I worked for, I never felt like I was working. I was different. I don't know how
Mhm.
else to say this, but
Yeah.
they were very, very open. They People were very, curious. Of course, they always used to ask me, what is India like? What do you eat? How do you
Sure.
live your life?
Interesting.
Which is
Yeah,
perfectly fine.
that's kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think that many of us don't share that, but, for many years it was beautiful. And, just to be assimilated in the culture, even though you are
Yeah.
so different from them, right? And with
Right.
so many different ideas, the way you look, the way you talk, your culture, your way
Mm.
of life, everything is different from them. And yet
Right.
they accept you for who you are and they
Yeah.
help you
That's
to progress
beautiful.
in life. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so I was very fortunate, at least in the a lot for many years when I was there.
Yeah.
I think the problem started when I first experienced this is when I moved to Texas and I took my first job at Texas Christian University.
Okay.
Um, and what happened is I got the job because TCU was actually having a push for diversity at the time.
Mm.
And they wanted to change how their staff looked like, or
Mhm.
people around them. They wanted to surround with different people because that's the type of people and students they wanted to attract to the
Mm.
university.
Gotcha.
And so, in TCU, if you look, the way the whole promotions or people who work there works is either you have graduated from the university or you have very strong ties. There is some form of fashion
Mhm.
you're involved, right? And usually you will come in there and you will grow into the position and then get promoted.
Yeah.
But what happened is for me, I was at the time working at Omaha Public Schools, and I interviewed for this job and I was being hired at the highest level that they had at the time. And he absolutely loved me, and I was offered the job. But
Mhm.
when I came in, I did not get the welcome I was expecting. It was a very
Mhm.
male-dominated
Mhm.
environment, and I was different, right? I wasn't raised here, and I actually, for the first time in my life, felt isolated completely.
Mm.
And I came so confident because I knew I was running systems, and I
Yeah.
had
You knew what you
actually
were doing.
coded. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
coded these systems, implemented multi-million dollar systems, and here I am, and all of a sudden, and it didn't take long to lose that confidence. Six
Yeah.
months into it, I started doubting myself. I said,
Wow.
what do I know? What
Mm.
made me take this job?
Yeah.
Right.
And it was the different reaction that you were receiving from the people that you were around all day, right?
Yeah.
Yes, because I was
Previously,
not
it was
included.
supportive. Mm.
Yeah. And see, my boss was like, he knew he had hired someone who was good at their job and he was supportive. But the environment was very different. Like, we all had cubes and we were sitting there. And most of them were men. So they all used to go and play basketball at TCU. There was a
Oh,
bonding time.
sure.
I had
Yep.
no bonding time. And then they
Yeah.
come back and they talk to each other. And when you are programming or doing anything, right, or managing a project, you talk to each other, you discuss,
Yeah.
and you say what are
Absolutely.
the pros and cons? How can we approach something differently, right? It's a team effort. It's not a one
Yeah.
man show anywhere.
Right.
But I never had that opportunity. They would stand and discuss among themselves. If I came, they would walk
Mm.
away.
Wow.
And
Oh my
Wow.
goodness.
yeah, and it became very difficult. And after a while, I started realize I don't know when this transition happened, but I started feeling depressed, not feeling
Mm.
confident. I was very worried when I would come to work, and every day I would think, when am I going to get fired?
Oh,
Oh,
And
that's a
so,
terrible
being,
feeling.
yeah, because,
yeah.
you're a top performer and you know that people listen to what you have to say.
Right.
And
Right.
Yes.
now you're someone that who cannot talk to anyone,
Yeah.
Or no one will talk to you.
and no one will talk
Right.
to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was
Exactly.
very difficult. That was the
Gosh,
first
Nina.
time I think in my life that I ever felt like I don't know what I'm doing here. And do
Yeah.
I am I even capable of, doing anything? That was the first time.
And
And
how
you
awful is
mentioned,
that? I
yeah.
mean, especially because you're educated, you're qualified, you all of these things. you're an incredible human being. I mean, you're just such a wonderful person and a personality.
Yes.
So the idea that all of a sudden all of that is put into question now because the way that you're being treated, which, but that it affected
Yeah.
you at that level is incredible as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
I mean, it
mentioned
does.
physical. You said physical, you started feeling it physically. And I
Yeah.
do hear that from people, and I know I've experienced that before too, where
Yeah.
what's in your head starts to manifest throughout your
Yes.
physical, and you're like, gosh, I was fine before. What in the world's going on?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Actually, what happened is when I left the company, right, I had to leave. I stayed there for 5 years, but around 4 years, 4.5 years, I started getting physically sick.
Mm,
And what happened is, I remember all of a sudden I couldn't walk.
Oh,
Like I was
wow.
bedridden. Yeah, I was bedridden, and I think it was because I didn't want to go to work. And
Probably.
I truly believed I was bedridden. My
yeah.
back, I had excruciating pain in the back.
Mm.
I couldn't go. I actually had to start taking my sick leave. And I realized that I was so unhappy that this was just not the place that I could be anymore. And that's when I first realized that when we are unhappy, things can translate into disease in our body, right? Because our
Right.
mind is telling us we are not happy. And every day, just getting into the car to go somewhere where you don't want to go, it's
Yes.
like a
Right.
curse, you know?
That
So
Yes.
stress, that
why would you want to
constant
do it? The
stress.
stress,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. No,
So it
it's
happened to
true.
Too
me.
much.
So so
Yeah.
I know that. And then, when I found my other job, luckily I was able to, my husband said, just stop, resign. You cannot do this anymore. And I did. And the day I
Which let's
resigned,
point out real quick that Neena is married and has two amazing children. So just to close out that part of the story for those of you who may be wondering, did she ever find a husband? She did, in fact, and is married to a
that's
wonderful
a
man
very
and
good
has two
story.
amazing children.
Yes.
That's
Someday I'll
awesome.
share that.
Your
Yes.
dad, your husband, you had two
Yes.
very
Two
supportive
very,
male,
yeah.
Yes, I did.
or have two very supportive males in your life.
Yeah.
That I'm so glad about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think my husband, I think he's a very different kind of person. But the good thing about him is he was not one of the men who was intimidated by marrying someone who had a master's degree, who, that was one of the
That's
challenges,
awesome.
when they were trying to find someone for me to marry. It was like no one wanted an educated person, not that educated.
Because
Right.
then they can't
Wow.
tell you when to stand up and when to sit down, Neena.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. That's
exactly.
Back
right.
to what your family was
Yeah.
saying previously. Yes. Goodness.
Absolutely. No, that's so true. Well, it is amazing how much it does kind of that it does manifest itself into those physical. And I think maybe for women, that's even more true because we are emotional beings. And so we
Mhm.
tend to process and internalize. And by internalizing, I think that also then creates some of those health issues that we end up dealing with as
Absolutely.
a result of it, right? Yeah.
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 Absolutely.
There's a tie-in between, neurologically and your gut health. I mean, they're talking more and more, people are talking more and more about
Yeah.
that, right? So if you have those high cortisol levels every single day, no wonder. I bet your Sunday scaries were awful every,
Oh,
at the
right?
end of every weekend. I can only
I'm
imagine.
Yeah.
sure.
Oh,
The funny thing
definitely.
is, after I resigned, I just stood up one day, like a week or so after that. I had no
Wow.
pain in my body.
There
I
you
was
go.
perfectly fine, and I couldn't explain it. And at one point, I was thinking this will sound crazy. I said, someone's doing voodoo on me from somewhere because I can't get out of the bed.
You do start to wonder though, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, how could I become like so debilitated? What's wrong with me?
Yeah,
So it was
absolutely.
your husband that said, "Come on, Neena, you don't have to work there anymore." That was sort of your wake-up call, and then
Yeah.
you found something else at that
Yeah.
point, Neena?
Yeah, and I think that helped me because, a lot of times we are working, right, to support the family, right? We
Yeah.
also, both of us work and both of us are supporting the family. But the fact
Right.
that he came to me and said, don't worry about how to support the family, right? This is really impacting you. And he said, you need to take a break. You need to get away from work. And I think you should just stop what you're doing. And I think that helped me, that confidence he gave me, because that's the
Yeah.
only reason I was going, right? It was for the paycheck at this point. It wasn't because I
Right.
enjoyed doing what I was doing.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
all need those people in our lives too who
Uh-huh.
are
We
like,
definitely
Yeah.
you're
do.
more than what you're letting
Yeah.
yourself believe right now because of these external factors, right? We have these conversations with ourselves, and I think sometimes we're so hard on ourselves, you
We
know?
are. Well, and I think, there are, especially, Nina, given your background, the statistics are that women represent only 28% of the workforce in science, technology, engineering, and
Hmm.
math, so STEM fields. And their underrepresentation can contribute to feelings of not belonging, which further exacerbates imposter syndrome. I'm
Yeah.
curious from your perspective, what advice would you give for young women who are really kind of looking to move into the STEM world, where there aren't a lot of female role models around that. So what advice would you give them?
I think it is important to work in an environment that you actually can grow, can talk, with others, right? You want an environment which is nurturing.
Mhm.
And I think there are many organizations, like I told you, this was like one off, right? And usually in
Yeah.
my career, I have had some very good organizations, very good leaders who were men, who were supportive of me. And
Mhm.
so I think that, we have to go and see every person has different experiences. It may happen that their first job may be awful and they may encounter people who are not supportive. And I would say that find something, because find something different. don't
Yeah.
don't put yourself in that, because it will kill your self esteem, and you don't
Yeah.
want that in the beginning of your career where you actually need someone to hold your hand, right? Because everyone needs
Right.
that.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah.
true. You know what I find interesting, Cindy, I'm curious if you pick up on this too, is that isn't it funny how we put so much in the male side of this, though, in that we need to be accepted and supported by men. Isn't that an interesting dynamic? Because I mean,
Mm.
and it is a male dominated world, so
Well
in many
dominated.
aspects. But it's curious that as women that we put so much of our self-worth around the idea of what men think, and having supportive men around us. Very rarely do
Absolutely.
you hear us saying, I have supportive females around me,
Yes.
and talk from that perspective, right? So it's just kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
That's a really good point then. So
Yes.
you had mentioned, Nina, your former jobs when you came to the US were more supportive and you felt like you were in a place that you felt like you belonged and
Yes.
you thrived. And so were those environments more of a mixture between men and women or like yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, but the people I reported to, like the positions were all male. And
Interesting.
I
Yeah.
remember, I think at Omaha Public Schools for a couple of years, I reported to a female.
Hmm.
But other than that, most of the people I reported to were male, and those
Yeah.
Hmm.
were the people you would usually see in the industry. I actually think, I think I shared this with you, but not with the audience here. But in when I was at Peter Kiewit, when I was about to have my son, I remember, and I think I shared this with you in private conversation, is working in
Yeah.
Peter Kiewit, working in the building. I don't know if you know Omaha well enough in Nebraska, but that building, when you walk in, usually people are in suits, and
Sure.
it's a very different kind of environment, right? Almost like being in Wall Street.
Hmm.
And I had not seen anything like this, right? And I was pregnant with my son, and it was very early on in my career. And when I used to walk in there, I always used to think, oh my God, look at these people. They look amazing. And, everyone had makeup and their hair was perfect. And,
Yeah.
I'm not into that. As you can see, I just, do
You look
everything the way I
great.
feel.
Yes. You look beautiful.
So,
You don't need
you know,
any of that
Yes.
stuff.
Right.
and I was like,
Exactly.
oh my gosh, like these are the most perfect people I've ever seen in my life. And I used to actually take extra time to look a little better, because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to look like when I show up there. But as I was, progressing with my pregnancy, I remember one time I wore an Indian dress. And, as I told you at the time, there weren't many Indians. I could see that people were looking at me, and, I didn't really bother. I kind of went up, and, I was on the sixth floor in that building. And I was very fit in those days. I actually walked up the six floors with my my tummy,
You go,
and,
girl.
and I sat there. And my boss, he was so wonderful. Chris Bear, like I said, I still remember his name. He used to walk around doing rounds all the time, talk to everyone, and that's somewhere I always learned about management. Being connected with the people,
Oh,
no
yeah.
matter
Yeah.
how high you are in a position. And he would come down and talk to us. And he came that day and he said, "Neena, I have noticed you're wearing something different today." And I said, "Yes."
Wow.
Yeah, I said, "This is like an Indian outfit. It's called Salwar Kameez." And he says, "So why are you wearing it?" And I said, "Well, one, it's a festival and, Indian festival. And second, I'm also carrying. So it has a lot of space and it kind of feels loose and easy to kind of move around."
Yeah.
He said, he just looked at me and he said, "Neena, you should wear this every day. Are you
I
comfortable in it?"
love
I
that.
said, "Yes." He said, "Wear it." I said, "But how?" I said, "I look so odd. Everyone's going to notice me." He said, "It's fine. They're going to notice you and they're going to realize like there is a person here from a different culture and that's good. And, we need
Yes.
diversity like this in our
Yes.
organization." Amazing. And I
Wow.
See,
did.
and
That's
so
incredible.
that's such a great example too of it is the culture that you're in.
Mm,
And if the
yeah.
culture is inclusive,
Yes.
like and curious, what is
Yes.
that? Why are you wearing that? Why
Yeah.
don't you wear that every day, Nina? It's like, this is amazing. That's an amazing culture.
That
I
is.
think it was
Yep.
not a good fit at your former job or at your next job where you went
Yeah.
and people were very exclusive.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
I love
And
hearing that
Cindy,
story.
one thing is I have never forgotten him. And
Yeah,
I
right.
Yeah.
remember him, I
Made a
Yeah.
mention
big
him in all the
impact.
speaking, like whenever I speak somewhere and it is relevant, I share these
Yeah.
examples when people talk about diversity because, in fact, I was at Pasha, I was attending someone else was speaking, and this was about inclusion. And
Uh-huh.
Yes.
everyone was telling examples of how they were not included. And I wanted them to hear the story because and everybody is, people of color. And I said,
Yeah.
we talk all the time about how we were never included, but we forget about the times how we were included.
Love it.
We good time. It's like in our
Everyone.
life,
Yes.
we don't remember the good times all the time. We always remember, oh my God, that was the hardest time in my life. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what we remember. But it is
Yeah.
important for us to share those things because these are the things that make us. And, we are in an environment which is supportive. We just forget to mention that. And so when I
Yeah.
shared that
Love that.
example, I remember people came to me after that and said, "Thank you for sharing that example."
Now, did
Yes.
they share examples of their own with you, Nina?
So
Is
we
that
were all in the audience. And so
yeah.
she opened up the floor and she said, like, tell me about your own experiences because this is how it is difficult. And I
Yeah.
forget her name. She's on LinkedIn with me, but she speaks to Sonia Aranza. I think that's her name.
Okay.
So, yeah, so she talks a lot about inclusion and diversity. And usually we always end up in the same speaking circle. She was at SHRM too. I was there too. And
Awesome.
but so I enjoy her sessions a lot, and I was there, and I wanted to share the story because I just felt like everyone was sharing all these negative stories,
Yeah.
and I
Oh.
said, we do have, and I shared another example. When was this? So this was during 9/11, and I
Mhm.
shared this example too. So when 9/11 happened, people didn't know the difference, between who had actually done the terrorism
Oh,
came
yes,
from a different
absolutely.
area,
Yes.
right? It wasn't
Yeah.
from India, it wasn't from
Right.
Pakistan. But
Yep.
what happened is our dresses are so similar, right? And we all look alike. I'm sorry to say that, but we all do because we all have come from the same area, right? So for others, we differentiate among ourselves, but the people here
Yeah.
in those days couldn't differentiate between anyone. So what happened is there was a lot of backlash. There were people who couldn't accept, right? Because we used to wear Indian
Mhm.
dresses and Indian saris and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of stories I have. Like when I went to the mall in Omaha and think about it in those days in Omaha, I never had a problem. In fact, one time I remember there was someone yelling at me and in the mall, and the other people came and supported me.
Oh,
And I was with
wow.
my son. Yeah, I was with my son at that time. And I think he was very young or something like that, 2 years, 3 years, I can't remember. But
Mhm.
he was young and I was there in the mall and they came to support me and they stopped this other person from yelling at me. So,
Mm.
not everyone is the same. And my neighbors were
Yeah.
supportive.
Right.
They came to our house. They said, "We know who you are. And, we know you're not like this. We are here to support you." And so, there is a lot
That's
of,
sweet.
there are many good people. And if people know you, they're there to support you. And you just have to work through that.
You know what I
Yeah.
love about what Neena is saying here, Cyndi, is because I was kind of thinking about this, is that there's so many things today that we focus in on that we didn't talk about. Like when we were coming up, and any of
Hmm.
us, you didn't hear words like imposter syndrome, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
wasn't even in our vocabulary. Those are things that have come up of late, and I
And you
wonder
talk
sometimes.
about it. Yeah.
And you didn't talk about it, yeah, for
Right.
sure. It's like you
Right.
just kind of, I think we adapted and adjusted.
That's
And
right.
whether that's right or wrong, I think what I'm hearing from what Neena's sharing here a little bit is that sometimes we do get so focused in on the negative aspects,
Hmm.
and so there's that side of it, and then the other piece that I wonder too, Neena, is that when you come from a different culture and you've experienced things differently than like Cyndi or I have,
Yeah.
right? Is your perspective different as well when you think about things like imposter
Yeah.
syndrome? Because we're looking at it through the lens of, frankly, white privileged women, versus looking at it through the lens of someone who is a person of color from a different country,
Yes.
who has had to deal with different challenges because
Right.
your upbringing is clearly much
Very
different than
different.
our upbringing, and so
Yes.
we experience things on different levels. And I wonder if we forget about that when we're generalizing things into these conversations around things like
Yeah,
imposter
and you're
That's a
right.
good
syndrome.
Like,
call
because,
out, Linda.
I share that example because, I'm an immigrant, right?
Hmm.
And I'm in an environment which belongs to you. I'm not a citizen at that time, right? It
Right?
belongs to the
Yeah.
people of this country. And I'm here and I'm living in this country, but people treated me no differently. I was not an imposter for them. You see,
Right. Right.
I
Yeah.
didn't feel excluded from that
That's good.
environment. I had a house, and wherever I was among the people who belong there, who were citizens, they came to support me. And I
Yeah.
was scared. I will be
Yeah.
honest. I was
Oh, for
scared.
For
sure.
sure.
I had young children in my house. I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people don't know differently. They don't know who I am. And
Exactly.
so,
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for those times. And I'm very grateful to the people and, that I met in my life who actually changed, and these are examples I share because people should know that there are
Yeah.
Yeah.
many good people in this world. And there are so many good people who are out there to help us. We just forget as times go by and we only remember the negative.
And I
Yeah.
think
Love that.
too, first of all, Linda, I think you make a really good point. It's a different it's a different lens to look
Hmm.
Yeah.
things like imposter syndrome, inclusivity, and things like that. And so I think when we're going through hard times where we're feeling less than or feeling like imposters, to recall, which I love, Neena, that you have these beautiful stories.
Yeah.
That's one thing that we've learned about you is you have wonderful stories. So to be able to go back to those stories and just it sort of fills your cup back up and like,
Yeah.
okay, I've got this. I've got this
Yeah.
because
I think
I've got a
so.
good community around me. They wouldn't think I was so wonderful if I'm not wonderful. So,
Yeah.
Are you looking for innovative and creative content options? Needing audio or video production or consulting? Or do you just have a great idea that you want to bring to life? LJM Productions specializes in making the big picture attainable, from commercials and social media content to just audio-visual cleanup and editing. We are here to make your next big project a reality. For more information or to receive a quote, email ljmproductionsco@gmail.com.
I actually have another example at UKG. I mean, I got hired at UKG. Linda hired me. And, when I was there first, she always told me, like, you have what it takes to be successful. But when I was there first, I had the same problem. I didn't feel like I could give
Mhm.
what I needed to, right? Because it
Mhm.
was different. It was sales. And it was trying to translate the information in a way that was needed, right? It's completely
Yeah.
different. But
Yeah.
having someone who's encouraging you makes a difference. And, Linda was always there and she always said, you can do this. Have you thought about it this way, right? Have you thought about maybe presenting this? And that's how I actually became a speaker, because I started thinking differently.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And I
awesome.
started thinking, how could I use it? And I think that is, I want to share this example because there is a lot of power in people, and we don't
Yes.
realize that,
And
right? There
someone
is
else believing in
yeah,
you. And yes.
so much power. And that's what
Yeah.
I've seen in my life is one, and it don't need a lot. That one person can change
Yeah.
your entire life. It
And
can
you may
change who
never
you are.
know. Yes.
Yeah, you don't know
I
it.
mean, Linda, you were definitely that for me when we first started working at the city and county of Denver. And you're like, come in and help me make this massive change. And I was like, what in the world am I thinking? But I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah,
Same thing with this
Absolutely.
podcast. What in the
Yeah.
world am I thinking? But I'm going to give it a shot because you are very supportive. And Neena, to what you're saying, when you have one person who's in your corner, that's
yep,
all it takes for you
Yeah.
to,
yep.
hey, there's got to be something there because this person sees it.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
now I speak so much. I mean, I have actually speaking in so many conferences. I'm being invited back. I get great ratings, and that was something I never thought of, right? And
Yeah.
unless she would have encouraged me, I would have never gone on that path, or never gone on the path of
Yeah.
writing. I mean, I write now for magazines and things like that. Never would have done any of that. So, someone encouraging you, believing in you,
Yes.
and telling you that you're not an imposter, right? You have a
Yeah.
lot more to offer, and
Yeah.
I believe in
Absolutely.
you. I think it's just that one simple word, I believe in you, I think can make,
All the
make all the
difference.
difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really can. No, I love that. Well, and what I love about this is it gives a different perspective because I do think that sometimes we do get caught up so much in the words because, I mean, I never even knew what imposter syndrome was until a few years ago when it really started to get
And
mainstream.
everyone
And when
was
I was
using it.
listening to
Yeah.
it, yes, and everyone was using it. And I'm like, oh, well, I used to just think of that as like, well, maybe I was lacking in confidence or maybe, my self esteem was impacted. I didn't really think of it as that I viewed myself as an imposter necessarily. And then you start to kind of embrace
Yeah.
it, right? Now you start thinking and you're like, oh, well, I guess I do have imposter syndrome. And so now you can kind of manifest that as
Yeah.
well because
Yeah.
everybody's talking about it, you're hearing it. And so you're like, oh, surely that must be what's going on. And so it is kind of like, I think to your earlier point is that there are power in words and power in people and
Yes.
that
Yes.
that is so important is to surround ourselves with those supportive people,
Yes.
both men and women, who really do say the things that we need to hear, and that it's important for young people to find those environments. So,
Yes.
your point, Nina, when you
Absolutely.
realized what a toxic environment you were
Yep.
in, your husband empowering you to say, walk
Mm,
away from this, we'll figure
mm.
it out, was amazing because then you found yourself in an even better situation,
Yes, I
right? And
did.
so, having the power to remove yourself from situations and find
Yeah.
that path, I think, is
And the
really important
bravery.
as well, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I'll tell you, it's
Yeah.
difficult to break that cycle. And that's why you need,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes what happens is when you're in that, you're like that, what is it that, what is it, the rat or mouse that just keeps going and,
Oh,
Right.
keeps,
They're
keeps
on
on
the
doing that
wheel and they
exercise.
just keep going. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
because you
A
don't know where
hamster
to
wheel.
go. Your brain
yep.
stops working. And
That's
you
right.
need a third person to come and tell you enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yep.
disrupt that thought process,
Yes,
which
you
you
have to
Yes.
had
disrupt it.
3 major periods in your life based on
Correct.
everything you've shared. Your dad, bless his
Mhm.
heart, your husband, and Linda.
Yeah.
It's like you can call out these and that boss, the boss that
Yes,
Yeah.
the
yes,
manager
Chris
that you
here.
had,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So to be able to call those times out, do you feel like sometimes maybe that kind of helps you to say, you know what, I can do this. I've got this.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gives me confidence even today. Like,
Good.
I always
Yeah.
think about the positive. I mean, it has given
Yeah.
me the strength. We all go through ups and downs in life. But I always think like, okay, even if, I had something for a little bit, something good came out of it, right? Because
Yeah.
and when I was at Peter Kiewit, something good came out because I never forgot what he taught me. I never forgot what a great boss needs to be. And I try
Yes.
to live by those, when I was a leader, like, when I'm working,
Yeah.
managing people, I try to follow those traits because, I
Yes.
remember how I felt.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
very important. So, those lessons, those people, I think, always live on, and you never
Yeah.
forget them, right?
That's
And you
true.
learn so much that if you can incorporate those good things in your
Mm.
life, in your everyday life,
Yep.
I think that's amazing, because that will make you successful.
It definitely will. No, I love that. Well,
Thank
and I
you.
wonder too if sometimes what ends up happening is because we do feel as a society and as a world like we need to label things. And so, because there are a lot of workplace factors like bias and discrimination, overwork, burnout. It says that, like in a 2020 survey by KPMG, they said that 75% of executive women reported experiencing imposter syndrome at some point in their careers, with many feeling pressure to constantly prove their value. And so,
Of
I mean,
course.
there is a lot out there, but I do wonder sometimes if do we make a mistake by labeling things so then it almost makes us does it exacerbate the situation when we
Mm,
start to
that's
label
a really
because
good question.
do we find ourselves then leaning into saying, well, it's because I suffer from imposter syndrome versus maybe being able to say, yep, but you know what? All of Nina's points, I'm going to change my situation. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to surround myself with positive people. And even on the gender pay gap, which we know exists today, like what are we doing about it? And I'm always amazed when I talk with women who are way better at it than I have ever been, which is to stand up for yourself when it comes to compensation and
Yeah.
negotiate for yourself. That's not really an imposter syndrome issue. That's a confidence issue, right? That's a
Yeah.
I'm going to do this, I'm going to say this and maybe you won't get the result that you wanted to, but I just wonder if do we hurt ourselves when we start labeling everything
I actually have a
sometimes.
great
Yeah.
example for that. So when I was working at City of Fort Worth, I moved from TCU and I got a job at
Uh-huh.
City of Fort Worth. So when I first got hired, they tried to hire me at the same pay that I was getting at TCU. Okay. And they basically told me, which is crazy, they basically told me was that we don't have money in the budget to pay you anymore, but we absolutely want you. So I said, it's okay. I'm happy here. I left this place anyway. So let me go somewhere else. And I took it and I come in there and I noticed that all the men were getting paid more than I was.
Mm.
And I knew,
Mm.
and I knew it because, I'm doing my work and I'm doing with them and,
Right.
this, and it's open information
Able to
and
have those
they come and talk.
conversations.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
all have
Yeah.
conversations in
Yeah.
human resources and they're telling me this. They're like, oh, we hired you for much, much less than what we are getting. And it was so tough at the time because, interesting, the director at the time was a woman, but
Mm.
she did not really support support a pay raise for me, and
Yeah.
she was like, yeah, whatever, we hired you, you agreed to the terms. so
Right.
so but the problem with that is you start feeling unhappy. So even though when
Yeah.
I came in I was really excited about the job, when I found out that I was not getting paid and everybody else was getting paid more than me, then I'm like, well, why am I doing all this work? And but you want
Yeah.
to do the work because you have signed up to do the work. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Mhm.
Right.
But there is
Yep.
something in the back of your mind bothering you, like, well, look, they are all getting paid so much more than I am.
It's
And
more
it's just
about
not
the
fair.
money too.
W-
Maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I were in that situation, I would be like, is what they're providing more valuable than what I'm providing?
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
Yeah, you
know?
question that. I
Yeah.
actually felt cheated because, I felt like they lied to me because
Mm,
when I wanted to accept this job, they basically told me that, Nina, we don't have any budget. We are basically like a poor man. They were telling a story
Uh-huh.
like, we don't have the
Right.
money, we're very poor people, blah, 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 and all this nonsense. But you come in there and you realize they have ton of budget. So
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a complete lie. So one thing I have never liked, I will share another story some other day maybe. But I do not work for people who lie to me. Moral values are extremely high. I will not lie, and I
Yeah.
don't like people lying to me. That is something I cannot compromise on.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
when the director left and a new director came, I went and said, "This is what I'm doing. This is what the other people are getting paid, and I need you to look at my salary." And they
Yeah.
did. And so that's when I
That's
got a hike.
good.
But
Yeah.
I showed him all the work I was doing. I was like, I'm not asking you to just pay me because I'm in this position.
Right.
Here's
Yep.
the success. Here are the projects I've done. And here is
Right.
why.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
I
and
think,
it was
Cyndi,
a
your
man,
point was really
interestingly.
Yeah.
The interesting part is it was the director was a man who agreed and gave me, and the woman who was there didn't want to give me. So, sometimes
It's the
it's
person.
interesting.
It's
It
the
is. It's the
person.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not the gender, it's the person. And
Right.
Cyndi, I think you brought up a really great point there is in that situation, it's not about the dollars and cents, it's about the value. So
That's
if
right.
the work that I'm doing is equal to what this
Then
other
why am
person
I?
is doing, then why am I not paid the
Yep.
same? And so, and there
That's
is,
right.
that's the issue. It's not
Yes,
about
I
the
agree.
actual dollar amount. And I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you also want, and then they tell you also, that's the funny part. Like after you're hired, they're telling me, like, oh, you didn't negotiate well. This is what I was told by my boss. He said to me,
Yeah.
you didn't really negotiate well, Neena, because you could have gotten a lot more. I said, I didn't realize. I mean, I expect that the other person is honest, is telling
Right.
Has
me
the
that this
moral
is my
compass
budget.
and is paying you what you're
Yeah,
worth. Yes.
Yep.
yeah.
But you know what? I
Why
do
should I
think
have to
that is a
negotiate?
little bit of the difference too in the whole idea behind along the concept of imposter syndrome and the difference between men and women is that because women will assume that you're going to just
Mm.
do the right thing. And you
Yes,
also will assume that if you do a good job and you work hard, that that's going to
yes,
be, compensated. And also, you're not going to overstate your abilities, where a
mm,
man will, and a man will negotiate much harder than a woman will
that's
in
true.
those situations. And so I do think that is kind of part of what has maybe gotten wrapped up in the idea around imposter syndrome in many cases as well, is that there are gender differences. And maybe what we need to do is focus in, instead of maybe calling it imposter syndrome, do we need to focus in on providing our women with the skills necessary to be able to operate
Mm,
on the same level as our male counterparts, or
yeah.
even
Yes.
females who do have that ability to come in and carry themselves in a different way. So
And I will just say that I don't know if it's different because of my upbringing. Like I would think that my
could very
culture
well
plays a
be.
role in
Yeah,
it, and a lot of
absolutely.
how I think is influenced by that. And I
Yeah.
think it's different if you grew up here, and you are raised differently. You're more polished. You kind of know, okay, this is the way it is.
Not always.
I
Not always. Yeah.
feel like
Don't know if I
Yeah.
agree
because
with
there are many things that I don't know, right?
yeah.
So, like an example I'll give you, it's funny. So many years I've been here, but I never knew that if you put things in capital letters, it means you're screaming at people.
Oh,
I
yes.
didn't,
Yeah.
honestly didn't know this.
And
So,
too
and this
many
happened at
exclamation
TCU.
points too, by the
Yeah.
way.
Too
Yeah.
many exclamations. That's right. Yeah.
No, but this happened at TCU. So I had talked to someone and I came back. I don't know what happened that day. For some reason, the caps lock was on and it was just two sentences. And I said to him, hey, can you get back to me or something like that? Then immediately the guy calls me like after 5 minutes. He says, why are you screaming at me? I said, what are you talking about? I said, I didn't see you. I haven't come near
Oh,
you. Like, what are you
oh
saying?
my
He's like,
goodness.
he said, you were screaming at me. I said, no. I said, oh my God, I thought you had gone crazy. And then he said, you sent an email. I said, yes, I sent an email. And he says, but it was in caps, right? Did you see it? I said, so? He said, that means you're screaming. I said, oh my gosh. And he said, how
Isn't
many
that
years have you been in US
how
and you don't know
interesting?
this?
Yes. How crazy is that?
Oh,
No
Right?
idea. So guys, this is for
Yeah.
everyone who knows me.
That's
There are
right.
many things I don't know. And if you think I'm making a mistake,
Yeah,
just tell me because I
that's
obviously don't
right.
know.
please be gracious and say, "Hey, Nina, I don't know that you if you know this or not."
Exactly.
I mean,
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole generational thing about that too, right? There's things
There
my
it is.
Oh,
daughter's like, "Do not say that, mom."
Yes,
I
that is so
know.
true, Cindy. Yes, no, I totally agree. It is. Yeah, some of that is generational for sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I didn't know that that was yelling until much later when somebody said, when you put things in all caps, it means you're shouting at someone. So I'm like, oh, I know, I had no idea. I'm like, I just,
To
I
me,
didn't even
yelling in
know
India
yet.
means you are actually yelling. It doesn't
Yeah,
mean
I'm
nothing
actually
happens on the
yelling. Yes.
computer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I love it. Well, we have so enjoyed having you on our
Yeah,
podcast.
Nina.
We hope you'll definitely come back again because you are just such a wonderful storyteller and you've got such a unique perspective on things
Yes.
that I think, not
Thank
just
you.
because of your culture and your background, but just who you are as a person. I think, you just have a very positive outlook on things, and it brings just a different perspective when we're looking at some of these challenging topics that we're talking about in the
Well,
world
I
thank
today.
you
would
so much.
agree. I would agree. You're a wonderful storyteller and an even better human being. So
Yeah,
Thank you, Neena.
Yes,
Thank you. I really
absolutely.
enjoyed being here, and hopefully I can come back again. Tell
We
more
would love
stories.
to have you
that.
again,
Yes.
and we hope everyone enjoyed a different take on imposter syndrome in this episode. I think, we shed a slightly different
Good.
light, and I think it was
Yeah.
I hope you all enjoyed it as much as we did. So, but we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their whatever you're doing, day or night, and we hope to see you back for our next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.